If you haven't heard, Bluesky is the new Twitter competitor. It's sort of like a Twitter clone, but it's built on this open protocol called the AT protocol. So I thought I'd give it a test drive. I created a Bluesky web client, and then I integrated in OpenAI with ChatGPT to recommend different tweets, or as they like to call it, skeets. So I'm going to show you how I built this application. And if you stay all the way to the end, you might find a way that you can get an invite for Bluesky by watching. So this is the app I created. It essentially uses the AT protocol to create a web client here. And I wanted to have some more convenience. So if you didn't know what to tweet, or I guess in this case, they're calling it skeets. I guess that's sort of an inside joke. If you choose here, I have 4 different categories. So let's say you're a web developer and you want to get an idea of what to skeet out. You just click generate response. And here it is. It gives you an option. As a web developer, I'm basically a professional Googler. If I wanted to send it out, I just click send skeet, and then it automatically updates. And you can see here, as a web developer, I'm basically a professional Googler. And just to show you that it works, there is a client, a native client that you can use. So if I load new posts here, you can see here, as a web developer, I'm basically a professional Googler. And then I can like that as well. Of course, you can create more generated responses. I can do one for React as well. So just finished my React app. Now everyone can experience the hassle-free joy of bug-free coding. Just kidding. I'm sure there's a few errors to discover. So as you can see through here, I can generate as many responses I want. I can generate them over and over again. And it's just kind of a neat little integration. Now the way the AT protocol works with Bluesky, it uses this, what they're calling it, the authenticated transfer protocol. And so it's built on this open standard. It's really in the early days. So if you're watching this, this is definitely going to be changing in the future. It's kind of a combination of like a federated protocol, but also it has some similarities to like a blockchain. So really they're trying to make this protocol open so that way anybody can build apps upon it. Now I also used the API documentation from OpenAI. So I just created a very basic prompt that I'll show you to be able to do the kind of generative ChatGPT things in here. And then I open sourced all the code. It's on this web Bluesky Nuxt. And I'll leave the link in the description if you guys want to follow along with this code and how it works. And I also give a shout out to Wes Boss. I looked at his repository and the work he's done using this protocol, and it really helped me out writing my app. So rather than me going through and creating this app, kind of live coding it for you, I'm just going to show you like the highlights of it and how I used it. I'm using Nuxt. So if you look at our package.json file, I had to install this AT Proto API. And then I also installed the OpenAI. So I had to make sure that I did that. I use Uno CSS. If you haven't checked out, I did a whole video on Uno CSS, and you can learn more about how it's basically a way easier way to add in utility classes into your app. What I had to do is in a Next config, the only little gotcha that I had is to add this build transpile to the AT Proto /API. Otherwise, every time I built it, it would give me an error that I'm using a require module. So it had some issues there, but after I added this transpile, it worked. And then I put all my actions, my server stuff inside these server routes inside my API. Kind of the biggest one would be probably the skeet post and timeline. When I created this, I wanted to make sure that I took all the code and kind of organized in a way. So I created a utils folder with some of the bigger functions. All this does is gets the timeline and returns it. One other thing that I had to keep in mind when using Nuxt is if I just return this feed here, I wouldn't get the right types coming back. So I had to use this to.json, which is a little bit weird. But one nice thing about Nuxt is when I did it this way, when I used the fetch inside my index file, it actually had the right types and I didn't have to add types to it. So I'll show you that. So for the authentication, I used a lot of the stuff that there's a whole bunch of Bluesky clients out there. Like I said, I took a look at Wes Boss's. I used some of inspiration from him to do it. Essentially with the login, it tries to read this file. If you have it, you can create the session.json file. And then I put all my environmental variables in a .env file. Nice thing about Nuxt is I didn't have to do anything special. It just worked out of the box. And then same thing for my OpenAI. I just passed in the org and API keys. The skeet, the protocol is really, I've noticed, very simple to use so far. I just use this agent that I pulled from that previous. I use this rich text to create my tweets. You can also do things like grab replies. You can do images. You can pretty much do everything. I kept it pretty simple so that the posts just have text in them. But if I wanted it to do this better, I can probably add images as well. And the timeline is just an array of objects. Now in the Index.vue file, you can see here I did this await fetch. This actually returns back the correct type for it, which is awesome. You can see the same thing here, this recommendation, it's all completely typed correctly. I did a bunch of regex, so when it comes back from the ChatGPT output from the API, sometimes it adds in like new lines, sometimes it was adding in like hashtags, and I couldn't get rid of it to not send return hashtags, so I just manually replaced them, and just a few things to make sure that it worked correctly. And then the post skeet, I'm just going to that same API, that API skeet that I just showed you using this fetch, and then grabbing the information out, and then I also pull the timeline in. And then I just have a couple of different components. So one is the new post, where I just pass in the model value. Well, I'm doing a V model, so I'm grabbing data here and passing the post skeet and kit recommendations. And then it's not too bad. I just have a text area where I'm having like two-way data bound. And then I have a post skeet where I'm just passing functions in. And then I'm using, of course, you can see here, this is all Uno CSS with Tailwind classes everywhere. And then I have this options, which I forgot to rename this because I copied this somewhere. This just real quickly, a select dropdown where I have different responses. And then once you click the generate button, this one right here, it passes in the selection into the Git recommendation. So the logic here in each one of these components isn't very, it's pretty straightforward. I guess the most difficult part is just defining all the props and then just using like this V model so that we have two-way data binding on the text value. Then in the skeet section, all I'm doing is I'm passing in the feed, which is typed, destructuring in here, and then just displaying everything. Now these buttons right here at the bottom, they don't actually work. That's fine for me. I don't really care. But if I wanted to, I could add in with the AT protocol a way to click this and have it retweet and do a bunch of things. But for this simple demo, I thought it wasn't really worth handling at this point. So this has been really fun creating this application. If you guys are interested, leave a comment below. Also, make sure you follow the channel. I will be picking 1 or 2 people to give invites for. Unfortunately, I don't have any invites right now. I just realized, but hopefully I'll have some soon. So as soon as I get an invite, you will get it. I will send it to two lucky people. I'll choose someone that is a developer. So leave a comment with why you'd want this invite. And if you've played around this AT protocol, feel free to check out my web Bluesky Nuxt, push up your PRs to make it even better. I'd love to have ability where we can take this text here and we can use ChatGPT to come up with a response. So if anyone can do that, that might be worthy of an invite as well. Thank you. I appreciate it. If you guys like this topic, I have another video on how I use Uno CSS with a Vue app and how I put it together and why you should check it out. Make sure you check this one out next.